I told him one day I would be the man, and I knew no one was listening.
What's good, everybody? What's good? It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you want to call me. And we are back for another one. Alright, y'all. New topic. Why Bob Arum dumped Terence Bud Crawford before the Errol Spence Jr. fight. Alright, y'all. So, why would a promoter dump his best product before his biggest fight? What would motivate somebody to say, you know what, I am not dealing with your shenanigans anymore? Well, if you ask me, it has a lot to do with loyalty, being hard to work with, and longevity, the future. Well, where should we start? Let's start with loyalty. Do I feel like Terence Crawford was 100% loyal to Bob Arum in Top Rank Boxing? No, I don't. I think Terence Crawford became spoiled because of the money Bob Arum was giving him. You know, he was one of the highest paid boxers, even though he had a very low $4 to $5 million is not high for a boxer, especially a superstar boxer. You know, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, De La Hoya, countless other names. These people were making $20 million plus per fight. So I feel like loyalty was the number one thing, or the number one reason why Bob Arum dumped Terence Crawford. You know, his loyalty, I don't think, was strictly tied in to Bob Arum and Top Rank. And especially when he started seeing the success that Errol Spence Jr. was having over at PBC. I think it was some jealousy that crept in and kind of corrupted Terence Crawford's mind, even though he should have realized, like, hey, I'm making more front money. I'm getting more up front than Errol Spence is. Errol Spence is just getting a lot more money on the back end of things, which could all been fixed in renegotiation. But obviously you can see that Terence Crawford has problems when it comes to negotiating. He does not, and I don't know if it's exactly him or if it's his team or his agent or his manager. He's a very I'll hold out type of guy, and sometimes holding out can hurt you more than it's helping you. Holding out can shoot yourself in the foot, because you might have actually been getting a better deal than you were at first. It might not be exactly what you want, but it could have been better than what you had. So I think loyalty is the number one. I think that Terence Crawford is extremely hard to work with. I think Bob Arum figured out that, or realized that, you know, this guy, even though I built him, even though it was my money and my matchmaking and my platform that brought him all, or the majority of his success, I think Arum realized, like, this guy, I can't work with him, you know, because he's not willing to bend on certain stuff. He's not willing to see the bigger picture. He's not willing to, when I put him in certain positions, to fulfill those positions. That Manny Pacquiao fight should have been the fight that shot Terence Crawford into superstardom. Now, he's a star in the boxing world, but he's not a superstar. And to be honest with you, Errol Spence nor Terence Crawford are on superstar status. Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather were superstar fighters. Oscar De La Hoya, superstar fighters. At one point, Miguel Cotto was a superstar fighter. Margarito was a superstar. You know, it's crazy to me now that there's so much more access as far as you can watch these fights and you can follow a fighter so much more closely than you could 15, 10, 5, 6 years ago nowadays. But the engagement is down. Like the fanfare surrounding this fight is huge, but the overall engagement for boxing and the sport of boxing is way down. It's like boxers are not becoming superstars anymore. They might be a star within the boxing world, but they're not global icons. They're not sports figure superstars anymore. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact these guys don't want to challenge themselves, the fact that these guys are hard to work with, the fact that these guys, their negotiating tactics are so outrageous. The dollar amounts that they want don't match the talent levels that they're bringing to the table. They're not matching up with the challenges they're willing to put themselves through. Listen, guys like Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, those guys had more difficult fights than in their career than Spence and Crawford have had fights in their career. Like Manny, I could pull probably 20 names out of Manny Pacquiao's list of fights that he had like 70 fights. And those 20 names would be way better and way more difficult fights than anything that Terence Crawford has done his entire career. And you didn't have to convince Pacquiao to get into a ring. You didn't have to negotiate with Pacquiao for 2 years to get him into a ring. You didn't have to give him ridiculous amounts of money to get him into the ring. You know why? Because those fights were that good. They were classic fights. They were worth paying him whatever he wanted to put the fight on. And unfortunately for guys like Crawford, he's not matching his difficulty and strength of schedule don't match up with the dollar amounts he wants. He hasn't challenged, the fact he hasn't challenged himself doesn't match up with the dollar amounts that he wants. And I think Bob Arum, smart businessman. Majority of people in the boxing world do not like this guy, but he hasn't been around for over 50 years in boxing for no reason. He has to be smart at something for him to actually be able to stick around for that long and be successful at what he's doing. There's two major promotional companies in boxing, and Top Rank is one of them. It's PBC and Top Rank, and then you can throw whoever else you want behind those two companies. Golden Boy, The Zone, they're not, those other 2-3 companies that are out there, they're nowhere near as big or as influential as a Top Rank or a PBC at this point in the boxing game. I don't, listen, I'm not a Bob Arum advocate, but I realize that for you to throw an asset like Terence Crawford away, for you to dump him, and especially right before the biggest fight of his career, there has to be a really, really good reason for that. And I think we're seeing that reason play out in real time with this negotiating process with Errol Spence Jr. Now, I don't feel like Errol Spence Jr. is so much more of a great businessman, or I just feel like his team overall in PBC had a better plan for Errol Spence Jr. than Terence Crawford's team had for him and dealing with Top Rank boxing. Once again, that Manny Pacquiao fight, I think, is the reason that he's not on Top Rank anymore. If he would have made that Pacquiao fight and beat Pacquiao, he would have been the biggest star in boxing at that point, because Mayweather was gone. It wasn't like Errol Spence was going to get in the ring with Mayweather and become a superstar fighter off of Mayweather, off of beating Mayweather, because Mayweather wasn't going to get in the ring with him. But Terence Crawford did have a golden opportunity. Now, Errol Spence had a golden opportunity as well that he backed out of. He ducked that fight based off an eye injury. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, that injury could have lost his eye. Okay, if he could have lost his eye, why would you not reschedule that fight? That fight would have made you a global icon. Once again, that fight would have made you a superstar. You know, and the amounts of money that they're arguing over now wouldn't have mattered if either one of those guys would have fought Pacquiao. And the same goes for Thurman. If Thurman would have won when he fought Pacquiao, he would be the #1 guy in boxing. Even with just that WBA super title, he would have been the biggest star in boxing at that point, and he would have been able to set the precedent for dollar amounts and super fight status when it came to the rest of the welterweight division. But because these guys, and you know, I give Keith Thurman a lot of credit because he did challenge himself and he did put himself on the line. He just happened to lose. And that shows how good Manny Pacquiao is. And I know a lot of people are against Manny Pacquiao because of the way he lost to Ugas, but Ugas was a whole different can of worms because of the way that fight came about. You know, you don't just throw a boxer into a fight on last minute or 2 weeks notice. You know, there's a reason that they have 8-week training before a fight. There's a reason that there's a lead up to a fight, 2 months sometimes, just for promo to get a fight made. You know, and they're usually training for these fights way before the actual training that 6 to 8 weeks actually starts. So nobody can convince me that even a legendary fighter like Pacquiao can just hop into a ring with no game plan and beat a sitting champion. You know, it just doesn't work like that. It worked like that for Pacquiao when he fought Ledwaba, but Ledwaba was the bigger superstar at the time, and they threw Ledwaba in with a Pacquiao that he knew nothing about, didn't have any preparation for, and Pacquiao beat the crap out of him because of that factor. So, you know, it is what it is. And I feel like Bob Arum, because he does have guys like Lomachenko and he does have other superstar fighters that he can deal with, he washed his hands of Terence Crawford and the headache that is Terence Crawford, because Terence Crawford is too difficult and too unwilling to work with what his promoter was putting on the table. And the things that Bob Arum was doing that were in Crawford's best interest, he went against them every time. And now look at him. You know, he's in a position to where if he takes this fight with Errol Spence, he's probably going to get less money than he deserves or thinks he deserves. And if he loses, his career is probably done anyway, because he based everything off of an O instead of just being a talented fighter who takes on all challenges. Let me know what y'all think about that down in the comment section below. Hit that like button for me. Share, subscribe, tell a friend. Holler at me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. But you're more than likely to get a response on the tubes, or holler at me over there if you want a response. Yeah, I think I'm done rambling for now. Yeah, it's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you want to call me, and we are
They just think I owe 'em something. I don't owe these niggas nothing.